The Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum in Indianapolis, Indiana has just undergone a colossal year-and-a-half-long overhaul. I have returned just after it reopened in April of 2025 to experience the all-new museum. The museum is located within the historic 2.5-mile-long track and has been located inside this vintage building since 1976. A few changes, which I think are actually improvements, have been made to the exterior, as the flagpoles in front have been shortened. I like this because they don't obstruct the building and lettering at the top as much as they did. Right outside the museum there is an Art Deco monument to motorsports innovation, with bas reliefs of early sponsors like Lewis Chevrolet, Tommy Milton, Gaston Chevrolet, and Henry Ford. It also memorializes the 74 people who have been killed in accidents at this speedway, including 42 drivers and 13 riding mechanics. They are still offering track bus tours, but I opted not to do that this trip. The place has changed a lot, so if you'd like to see what it used to look like, you can check out my video tour that I filmed just before they closed for the renovation. Now it is a completely new museum. They really did change the interior entirely. There's this nice sleek entrance when you walk in. And here's the Novi Groove Piston Special, a fan favorite from the 1948 Indy 500. The new galleries begin at the beginning of the Speedway story with Gasoline Alley. The new exhibit highlights the change over time to Gasoline Alley and the racetrack as a whole. I also love how they have the brick starting line. Gasoline Alley, with its white and green sheds, is where the crews have always prepped for race day. It was first built in 1910 but is heavily modernized today. The Brickyard on the track is the traditional starting and finishing line of all speedway races, with a line of original bricks from 1911. On one side of the exhibit, there are garages representing different decades in the speedway's history. Opposite, big display cases feature various artifacts and paraphernalia corresponding to the decade. The first Indy 500 race occurred on May 30th, 1911, and here are some relics from those pioneering days of auto racing. The speedway itself was built 2 years earlier in 1909, with the goal to rival European auto racing venues. At the time it was much more popular across the Atlantic. The entire original track was paved over with 3 million bricks. That's the Wabash Clay contract for all those bricks. Repaving with asphalt began in the 1930s. That's an amateur championship trophy from a race which happened a year before the first Indy 500. Those are original speedway programs from 1910 and 1911, along with an old-timey race driver's helmet. And there are some century-old trophies, like the winner's trophy from 1919. The cars in those first races were mostly just stripped-down passenger cars. However, the Indy 500 soon encouraged innovation and development on purpose-built race cars. That's a mechanic's race suit from the 1930s. During the early decades, it was often mandatory for a mechanic to be on board in the event of emergencies. The 1931 winner's trophy is a sculpture of a woman being pulled by hounds. There was also a Napoleon trophy in 1934. I love the vintage pennants they have on display, as well as that old timing bib. Those are the medals won by Jimmy Murphy as the first and only American to win the Grand Prix at Le Mans in 1921, and he did it with a doozy. The Duesenberg brothers were involved in racing here at the Indianapolis Speedway beginning in 1913, so this first garage features a 1914 Duesenberg entry into the Indy 500. This car was driven by Eddie Rickenbacker, who would go on to have quite the illustrious career here at the Speedway and in war-torn Europe. One of the most significant early race car designers was Harry Miller, who built this beauty in 1928. Leon Duray raced this Miller Special with a straight-8 engine Indy 500 that year. The car turned out to have some mechanical issues. Here in this garage, we have a 1950s race car from the Dean Van Lines team. Driver Jimmy Bryan, who would go on to set records in the European racing world, placed third with this car in 1957. I love the theming of these garages. You may have noticed the garage looks quite a bit different. Gasoline Alley burned down in the 1940s, so a new concrete complex was built in its place. The speedway closed down during the Second World War and its future looked bleak. However, the popular driver Wilbur Shaw was able to convince industrialist Tony Holman of Clabber Girl baking powder to purchase the speedway, and so the races continued. That's a crew member suit worn by someone who was stationed in the real gasoline alley back in the 50s. This case is packed with antique souvenirs from the 40s and 50s. It's great to see that so many non-vehicular artifacts can be displayed now. That pith helmet is even conveniently labeled as a souvenir. How cool is that? There's a cutaway of a Firestone tire used on the track, and a program from 1946 signed by the members of the 100 Mile an Hour Club. Jim Clark drove this Lotus Type 34 powered car with a Ford quad-cam V8 engine in 1964. Suspension issues foiled his race, but the car still looks cool. This was driver Johnny Rutherford's race suit from the 1976 Indy 500, which he won thanks to the rain causing the race to be cut short. This is an awesome Speedway trophy clock with the Soldiers and Sailors monument from downtown prominently featured on it. The new placards accompanying these artifacts have lots of great tidbits on the Speedway's history. When visiting, it is worth taking the time to read everything in here. One talks of the 150 mph barrier on the track being broken in 1962, then Tom Sneva made the 200 mph record in 1978. Janet Guthrie made history in 1978 as the first woman to compete in the Indy 500, driving in this very car with a secretly injured wrist. She finished 9th. In the 1970s and 80s, IndyCar became increasingly popular, so these artifacts represent that era, including a drawing of driver Rick Mears. In the 1980s, Gasoline Alley was fully revamped with bigger and modernized garages. All of these helmets and paraphernalia represent that growing era. This is a unique bas-relief sculpture of the front straightaway of the Speedway. That's the racing suit and helmet of Lynn St. James, the first woman to win Rookie of the Year. ABC broadcasted the full race live for the first time ever back in 1986. Though to this day it is blacked out in the Indianapolis area, you've got to be here to see it, unless it's sold out like it was in 2025. Here is the 1993 car driven by Formula One champion Nigel Mansell in his first Indy 500, where he placed third despite the fact he had never driven on an oval track before. Here is some memorabilia from more recent years with items from new events like the IndyCar Series and the Red Bull Indianapolis GP motorcycle race. There hadn't been a motorcycle race here for nearly a century. There's an autographed milk bottle, and Dan Weldon Memorial sunglasses. There's a core sample of the track showing how it all started with brick. And here in this final Gasoline Alley garage of the future, at least for the 90s, we have Arie Luyendyk's car, which he used in an eventful qualifications match, just to have a collision during the race. Now let's check out the brand new immersive show, the Starting Line Experience. Following the recent screen-based immersion trend, they have developed an audiovisual experience with a curved floor-to-ceiling screen to put visitors into the action on race day. It now takes place on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend each year, when over 300,000 people descend upon these hallowed grounds. There are even some real race cars in here, which is a nice touch.
For the presentation of colors, invocation, and a moment of reflection for those who've given their lives unselfishly to defend our freedom. From Auckland, New Zealand, it's the Iceman, Scott Dixon.
In motor racing, the Indianapolis 500. Drivers, start your engine!
So that was pretty good. If you'd like to see the whole show, I have a separate video linked in the description. Now we are in the central corridor of the Motor Speedway Museum. This looks quite a bit different because there used to be a skylight in here. It has been concealed. Of course, high concentrations of natural light is not the best for historic artifacts, but they were planning to add on to the immersion aspect by having a screen of the sky up there where they could have the jets fly through and fireworks and some other effects we saw in the showroom. That clearly did not happen, so it's just plain now. I am glad they kept the old terrazzo floors, and you can still make out where they used to have a fountain in the center of the museum. This museum reimagining cost over $60 million, and I'm impressed they actually completed and reopened on schedule. There is a lot more exhibition space now. It used to be that most of the displays were just in this one cramped room, but now they've added a second floor mezzanine above it, they have reutilized the space on this main floor, and they developed the basement for exhibit space. It's very exciting and it looks really good too. The lighting is well placed, and there's lots of immersive sounds of engines revving and whatnot. The one thing that has not changed is this car being the centerpiece of the museum. This is the Marmon Wasp, the first champion car of the Indy 500. This torpedo-shaped Marmon car, built by the Marmon Motor Company of Indianapolis, was driven to victory by Ray Harroun in the first Indy 500 on May 30th, 1911. Harroun was already an accomplished car builder and driver. He had set land speed records several years before. He had technically retired from racing, but Marmon convinced him to come back and get involved with his car for the big new race. The Wasp ran an average of 75 miles per hour during the grueling 500-mile race. The reason he is credited with winning is because he chose not to have an onboard mechanic like most drivers. Instead, he spruced the car up with an accessory of his own design, the rear view mirror. This is believed to be the first instance of a rear view mirror being used in racing, and was one of the first times it was used on an automobile. So this is a car that truly made history right here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Behind the Marmon Wasp is the coveted Borg Warner Trophy, the official trophy presented to the winners of the Indy 500. It was unveiled in 1936 by Eddie Rickenbacker. Every winner of the Indy 500 since 1936 has had their mini face added onto the trophy. It's so exciting to see this beautiful trophy spinning in the center of the room. It's a fantastic way to show it off. Here's a display on sculpting the faces. It starts with a clay model based on photographs, then it's used to create a plaster version. Eventually, a jeweler transforms the face into sterling silver. The winners also get an elaborately decorated wreath placed on them. The Marmon Wasp is juxtaposed with the race car that won 100 years later in 2011, highlighting the tremendous evolution in race car design and technology since Ray Harroun's pioneering work. And here's the in-between car that won the 50th anniversary Indy 500 in 1961, the first of A.J. Hoyt's wins. This is another incredible car. The 1939 Boyle Special that was driven by Wilbur Shaw to victory in both 1939 and 1940. Shaw had ordered this Maserati for 1938, but the company sent him the wrong car. He did get a couple wins with this car once it arrived. The 1953 fuel injection special Curtis Craft was driven by Bill Vukovich 3 times. He lost in 1952 but won in both 53 and 54, before fatally crashing in 55. Underdog Jacques Villeneuve ended up winning in 1995 with this Players Reynard 951, after a series of incidents led him to the front of the pack when it mattered most. This is Jimmy Murphy's doozy. He won the Indy 500 in 1921 with this Indianapolis-built Duesenberg, then became the first American to win the European Grand Prix in France later that year with this very car. I like the way some of the cars are displayed in elevated wall spaces around the room. The Johnny Lightning Special here won in 1971. The 1932 Miller Hart Special won that year while setting a new speed record of 104 miles per hour. Mechanic George Salo was intrigued by the Cummins diesel car. I was surprised they don't have one of those on display here. But anyways, he adapted that design with an Offenhauser engine almost horizontally for a lower center of gravity in this car, which won in 1957 and 58. The legendary early race car designer Harry Miller dominated the 1928 race, with most of the cars having been his models. However, this one came out as top dog. This McLaren, with its newly legalized bolt-on rear wings, won in 1972, setting a race speed record of 162 miles per hour, which went unmatched for a dozen years. Al Unser won in 1978 with this car, even though he hit a tire in the pit box. Gordon Johncock won in 1982 with this Wildcat. He led by only 2 seconds in the last 3 laps against some serious competition like Mears, Foyt, and Andretti. This Riselone Special Eagle was driven by Bobby Unser to victory in 1968, which was the first ever win with a turbocharged engine. The Indy 500 was becoming globally known in its first few years, so the French Delage company sent in this car for the 4th race in 1914, and it won. French manufacturers had the top 4 positions that year. The Domino's Pizza Hot One was the 1990 champion. Now let's head downstairs into the newly refurbished basement. There is plenty of new exhibit space down here, featuring lots of Indy cars and NASCARs. The loading area for track bus tours is also in the basement. For 78 years, the Indy 500 was the only annual race here, but that changed in 1994 when NASCAR came to the Indianapolis Speedway for the Brickyard 400. It ended up consistently having the largest spectator turnout for a NASCAR event back in the 2000s. Jeff Gordon won the first ever Brickyard 400 with the Chevrolet Lumina, with an average 131 miles per hour during the race. Dale Earnhardt won the second Brickyard 400 in the Chevrolet Monte Carlo. He averaged 155 miles per hour. A Hoosier, Tony Stewart of Columbus, Indiana, won the 2005 Brickyard 400. It was his first win at Indianapolis after several attempts in both the Brickyard 400 and Indy 500. The 2006 race proved dramatic, but it was won by the Chevrolet Monte Carlo. This Ford Fusion won the Brickyard in 2018. It was Team Penske's first Brickyard win. The Brickyard 400 did not return after the COVID pandemic until 2024, and it is happening again in July of 2025, so it's safe to assume it's back for good now. Welcome to the other Indianapolis 500 Winners Gallery. While just about all the cars upstairs in the main gallery were winners, there's a whole lot more down here. It's great that there's so much more space now to display the cars in their collection, because they own hundreds, including a majority of the champion cars from throughout the race's history. The 1996 Indy 500 was the first race under the new Indy Racing League, which imposed a new controversial qualifying rule, so many of the old teams boycotted that year, opening up an opportunity for Buddy Lazier in this car. I mentioned that ABC launched the first broadcast in 1986. Well, this was the car that viewers around the country and the world watched while glued to their television screens. In 1950, Johnny Parsons noticed what he thought was a crack in his engine block during the race, so he took a risk by going all out for the prize money, speeding way ahead of everyone in a do or die. It ended up being the first rain-shortened race, so he won. This is the 1912 National, the second winner of the Indy 500. The stripped-down performance-enhanced passenger car was built by co-founder Arthur Newby's company. This car had the largest engine to ever win the Indy 500. After the World War II hiatus, George Robson won the first race back in this car. This low-slung front-drive spark plug special won twice with driver Maury Rose in 1947 and 1948. This dirt car took the checkered flag in 1952 with driver Troy Ruttman at 22 years old. He remains the youngest Indy 500 winner. Bill Vukovich was favored to get his third win in 1955, however he was killed in that race, so Bob Swikert won in this Curtis Craft. A.J. Foyt secured his second Indy 500 win in the deadly 1964 race. It was the last time a front-engine car won. This car was victorious in 1941. Floyd Davis started, then pitted teammate Maury Rose took over partway through, so they are both credited as the winners. There is now a sizable designated special exhibition space where they're hoping to get major traveling exhibits. The first exhibition is called The Best of the Best, highlighting the 4 drivers in IndyCar history who beat the odds and won 4 different times. They have the cars and racing suits for all 4 of them on display. A.J. Foyt was the first driver to win the Indy 500 4 separate times, and he did it with this car in 1977. He and his team developed this victorious car themselves, and it was the last time an All-American car with an All-American built engine and chassis won. That was Foyt's vintage racing suit. There are Foyt's Baby Borg trophy plaques and his leather jacket for the 100 Mile Club. Big Al Unser drove this Cummins Holset Turbo Special March 86C to his 4th win in 1987, becoming the second driver to join the club. He set a lot of records during his 3-decade career here. He still has the second most laps led during Indy 500 races. The 87 win also made him the oldest ever winner at the age of 47. Here's one of Al Unser Sr.'s race suits and helmets. Unfortunately, the Unsers closed their racing museum in Albuquerque after his death. Here are just some of his numerous accolades. I do really like this L. Strauss & Company Winner's Clock trophy. It's very Indianapolis. The third 4-time winner was Rick Mears, who joined on to Penske Racing in 1978, and he would drive this Marlboro PC20 to his 4th win in 1991. The most recent 4-time winner was Helio Castroneves, who won the Indy 500 on his first try in 2001 with this Dallara race car. He won again in 2002, and finished second by a split second in 2003. Al Unser was a big supporter of Helio Castroneves throughout his career, and Rick Mears was a spotter for 3 of his 4 wins before he joined this exclusive club. He won his 4th 20 years after his first in 2021. This is the suit and helmet he wore in that race. Yes, these 4 did get their faces plastered onto the Borg-Warner trophy 4 times, but no one has made it to 5 wins yet. There's a nice new mezzanine area above the main gallery, where they displayed non-vehicular artifacts about the Speedway's history. So let's explore some more of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway story. Starting off with this display on the most recent Indy 500 winner after the museum reopened, Josef Newgarden, who won $440,000. Not bad. You do get a neat overhead view of the legendary cars below, and that twirling Borg Warner trophy. This is the Wheeler-Shebler Trophy, created by Tiffany & Company for the Speedway's first ever automotive competition in 1909. However, that did not go well and the trophy was not awarded. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway was the brainchild of Carl Fisher, which he envisioned as a place where manufacturers could test their new designs and showcase their automotive products to the public. He enlisted fellow Indianapolis area industrialists James Allison, Arthur Newby, and Frank Wheeler onto the project, and here at the museum they have good information about all four of them. Fisher and Allison started a company called Presto Lights, which produced acetylene gas canisters for automobile headlights, one of the earliest forms of car headlights. They made a lot of money when they sold the company, which allowed them to build the Speedway. Carl Fisher also spearheaded the Lincoln Highway, the first transcontinental highway started in 1913, as well as the Dixie Highway, which connected paved roads from Michigan to Florida. At the southern end of the Dixie Highway, he developed Miami Beach too. When celebrity World War I flying ace Eddie Rickenbacker returned from the war, he stayed faithful to his true love, cars. Despite his company having just filed for bankruptcy, he bought the Speedway in 1927, and over the next 18 years he introduced new safety measures like helmet requirements. From 1924 to 1936, the winner got to wear this crown. Now they get to drink milk. The milk thing has really become iconic, and it started with 1933 winner Louis Meyer, posing after his win with a bottle of buttermilk. Dairy executives got involved after seeing the popular newsreel and got milk to be the primary prize, besides the enormous check. The Speedway really did fall into disrepair during the World War II closure, and many expected it to be demolished, so Wilbur Shaw and Tony Holman coming in to revitalize it was a big deal. Tony Holman's grandson, Tony George, took the helm as Speedway president from 1989 to 2009. After the Holmans owned it for 74 years, driver and team owner Roger Penske bought the Speedway in 2020. He's had a long journey to becoming owner since he first visited the Speedway as a teenager in 1951. The day before the Indy 500, there's a big Indy 500 parade downtown. That's a heavy-duty track fire rescue suit. It's still a risky business here. This is 2025 Indy 500 winners Alex Palou's racing suit, next to a mini Astor Cup award. And here is the real Astor Cup, a storied trophy originating from an old 1916 race in Brooklyn, New York. Now the winners of the Indy 500 are presented with it. Here are some safety patrol uniforms from across the decades, along with an Indiana National Guard uniform from 1914. Here are some IndyCar-inspired toys. These are action-packed paintings of the Indy 500 races by Leroy Neiman, one of the most popular sports artists of the 20th century. This Art Deco-inspired trophy honors winners of the Brickyard 400. Here's the race suit of Kyle Larson, who won the 2024 return to the Brickyard 400. The United States Grand Prix was held at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the early 2000s for Formula One cars. There are still some F1 races in the US, just not here anymore. A midget racing track was built across the street from the Speedway in 1946, and the USAC National Midget Race happens here nowadays. The first competitive event held here at the Speedway wasn't an auto race. It was a hot air balloon race in 1909. Some balloons made it as far as Tennessee and Alabama in a bit over a day. The Wright brothers held the first ever licensed aviation event in the nation here at the Speedway in 1910, and now air racing has returned over 100 years later with the Red Bull Air Race. Here's an interactive section with all sorts of hands-on experiences like a pit stop practice. Those mechanics have to be insanely fast. It takes 7 seconds to fill an Indy car with 18 gallons of gas. There are also quite a few racing simulators. Now we'll head into the Penske Gallery, which is in a big back room that was completely underutilized in the old museum. This hallway is lined with a Team Penske Hall of Fame of sorts. This is pretty sweet. The gallery is lined with racing suits, helmets, engines, and there are several race cars. This was the recent 2024 winner, the Dallara IR12 driven by Josef Newgarden. This is a Dallara IR12 driven by Helio Castroneves to victory in 2009. Here's an older car, the 1969 Lola T152, which had the capacity for 75 gallons of fuel. Indy cars currently have a capacity for about 18.5 gallons. Here we can see the evolution of the Penske race suit. These were worn by all sorts of famous drivers like Al Unser Jr. and Helio Castroneves. Here's a grand lineup of champion helmets along with mini Borg Warner trophies. There are quite a few Castroneves helmets in here. He did win 4 times after all. Team Penske has won 20 Indy 500s, more than any other single team in history. This Curtis Craft won in 1951. It was driven by the gutsy Lee Wallard, who had second-degree burns on his legs, finishing 2 laps ahead of second place with a beast of an Offenhauser engine in there. Al Unser Jr. won in 1994 with his Penske PC23. And here's a car that was driven by Rick Mears in 1988 for his 3rd 500 victory. Here are various high-capacity engines used in Indy cars over the decades. President Donald Trump presented Roger Penske with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in his first term. Here's a collection of Indy 500 championship rings. And here's a replica of the Astor Cup. Team Penske has won 17 replicas. There's a good view of the speedway from here, including the iconic pagoda at the Brickyard. The first small Japanese-inspired pagoda was built there in 1913 as a wooden judge's stand. Several versions have been built over the years, gradually getting larger until the colossal glass one that stands today. And now we exit through the supersized gift shop. Yep, this definitely got an expansion too. So the new Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum is a perfect example of a museum renovation done right. As much as I like the old museum, this is undoubtedly a colossal improvement and a much better, more dynamic museum for 21st century audiences. But there's not less, there's more, which usually isn't the case these days. They display all sorts of artifacts they really didn't have the capacity to show before, as well as many more cars. So congrats to the Speedway Museum for a job well done. I would definitely recommend visiting this museum whether you're a racing fan or not. It's just a really good museum now. If you enjoyed this video tour, then please take a look at my other travel videos featuring museums, historic places, roadside attractions, national parks, and much more all around the United States and Europe. I did witness and record the first ever Weenie 500 Oscar Mayer Wienermobile race on Carb Day here at the Speedway in 2025, so that was fun. There's a video linked in the description. Also, please make sure to like this video. I'd also appreciate it if you could share it and subscribe to my channel as well. All of that helps out a ton. Thanks for watching.